There is a plant sitting quietly in millions of American homes. It stands in a corner, near a window, sometimes in a bedroom, sometimes in a living room. Most people barely notice it. It doesn't ask for much water. It doesn't complain about low light. It simply stands there, tall and silent. But here is the strange part. This ordinary-looking plant has built a reputation that sounds almost unbelievable. Some people say it can clean the air in your home. Others say it releases oxygen at night, and many gardeners claim it is almost impossible to kill. But how much of this is actually true? Is the snake plant really a miracle houseplant, or is it one of the most overhyped plants in modern homes? Before we answer that, there's something important you need to understand about where this plant came from. And trust me, when you hear its story of survival, the way you look at this plant might change. The plant we call the snake plant has another scientific name, Dracaena trifasciata. For many years, it was known as Sansevieria, but most people simply call it the snake plant because of its tall leaves that look like the skin patterns of a snake. Those leaves grow straight up, sometimes reaching 2 or 3 feet tall indoors. The green and yellow stripes give it a sharp, almost wild appearance. But the real story of this plant does not begin in a cozy American home. It begins thousands of miles away in one of the harshest environments on Earth. The snake plant originally comes from parts of West Africa. In those regions, the climate can be extremely difficult. Long periods of dry weather, hot temperatures, soil that does not always hold much water. For many plants, that environment would mean certain death. But the snake plant evolved to survive exactly those conditions. It developed thick leaves that store water like a reservoir. It learned how to grow slowly and carefully, conserving energy. And over time, it became one of the toughest plants in the plant kingdom. But this survival ability is only the beginning of the story, and in a moment we will talk about the strange scientific claim that made this plant famous all over the world. As trade expanded and plants traveled across continents, the snake plant eventually found its way into Europe and later into North America. People quickly noticed something interesting about it. Unlike many delicate houseplants, the snake plant seemed almost indestructible. Forget to water it for weeks, it survives. Place it in low light, it survives. Move it to another room, it survives. Because of this, it slowly became one of the most recommended plants for beginners. Garden centers began selling millions of them. Interior designers loved the clean, vertical shape of its leaves, and homeowners loved the fact that it required almost no effort to keep alive. But the plant's popularity exploded for another reason entirely, a reason connected to a famous scientific experiment that people still talk about today. In the late 20th century, researchers working with NASA conducted studies about indoor air pollution. Modern homes can trap small amounts of chemicals released from furniture, paints, and other materials. Scientists began testing whether certain plants could help remove some of these compounds from the air. During those experiments, several plants showed interesting results. One of them was the snake plant. In controlled laboratory conditions, the plant appeared capable of helping reduce certain airborne chemicals. When news of this study spread, it created an enormous wave of excitement. Suddenly, the snake plant was not just a decorative plant. People began calling it a natural air purifier. Articles and websites claimed that placing a few plants in your home could dramatically improve air quality. Some even suggested putting a snake plant in your bedroom because it supposedly released oxygen at night. But here is where the story becomes a little more complicated, and this is something many viewers don't hear about until much later. The NASA study was real, but the environment where the experiment took place was very different from a normal home. In the laboratory, plants were placed inside sealed chambers where scientists could carefully measure changes in the air. In a real house, however, the situation is not the same. Air moves through windows, doors, and ventilation systems. Rooms are much larger than laboratory test chambers. Later researchers explained that while plants can help in small controlled spaces, the number of plants required to noticeably change air quality in a typical home would be extremely high. In other words, a few snake plants in your living room probably won't transform the air the way people once imagined. But that does not mean the plant is useless. In fact, the real value of the snake plant might be something completely different, and this is the part many people overlook. Plants change the way a room feels. Studies in environmental psychology have shown that indoor greenery can make spaces feel calmer and more comfortable. For older adults especially, plants can create a peaceful environment that reduces stress and brings a sense of connection to nature. When you see green leaves catching sunlight near a window, your brain often interprets that as a safe and natural environment. And the snake plant has one huge advantage over many other houseplants. It survives with almost no attention. For someone who doesn't want the pressure of constant plant care, this can be the perfect companion. But before you decide to bring one home, there is an important detail that many new owners don't realize until it's too late. The snake plant is famous for surviving neglect, but the biggest danger to this plant is actually kindness, more specifically, too much water. Because the plant evolved in dry regions, its roots are not designed to sit in constantly wet soil. When people water it every few days, like other plants, the roots can slowly begin to rot. Leaves may turn yellow or become soft at the base. Ironically, the plant that survived deserts can sometimes die in a comfortable home simply because someone cared too much. That's why experienced plant owners often give the same advice. When in doubt, wait longer before watering. The snake plant would rather be slightly thirsty than drowning in moisture. Another interesting feature of this plant is the way it multiplies. Over time, small shoots called pups begin to appear near the base of the main plant. These baby plants slowly push through the soil and grow into new leaves of their own. Gardeners can separate these pups and place them into new pots, creating entirely new plants from the original one. This ability to reproduce easily is another reason the snake plant spreads so widely around the world. A single plant can eventually become many. And in a quiet way, that mirrors the journey the plant itself has taken, from the dry landscapes of Africa to apartments and homes across America. There is also one small warning that responsible plant owners should remember. While snake plants are safe to handle, they can be mildly toxic to pets if eaten. Cats and dogs that chew on the leaves may experience stomach discomfort. For that reason, it's best to keep the plant somewhere pets cannot easily reach. It's a simple precaution, but one that many people appreciate knowing in advance. By now, you might be wondering something. If the snake plant is not a magical air purifier, why has it remained so popular for so long? The answer may actually be simple. In a world where many things require constant attention, the snake plant represents something different. It survives quietly. It grows slowly. It asks for almost nothing, yet it continues to stand tall year after year. That quiet resilience may be the real reason people keep bringing it into their homes. And that brings us to the most important point of this story. The snake plant is not famous because it performs miracles. It's famous because it survives. It survives drought. It survives neglect. It survives changing environments and long journeys across continents. And in many ways, that resilience mirrors something people value deeply, especially later in life. Strength is not always loud. Sometimes it's simply the ability to remain standing when conditions are difficult. So the next time you see a snake plant in the corner of a room, remember that it carries a story far bigger than its pot, a story that began in African soil, traveled across oceans, and eventually found its way into millions of American homes. A plant that does not demand attention, but quietly proves a powerful lesson about endurance. And that may be the real reason this plant refuses to disappear, not because it is magical, but because it reminds us that survival itself can be something remarkable.